I thought I was just helping a lost traveler. But days later, the president himself called me. That's when I realized I had saved someone far more important than I ever imagined. The wind howled through the dense forest as John Carter adjusted his worn-out jacket. Retired from the military for years, he had grown used to the silence of his cabin, far from the chaos of the world. But that night something felt off. The barking of his old dog, Ranger, echoed through the trees, pulling him toward the front porch. That's when he saw it, headlights flickering in the distance. A car, stranded in the storm. John grabbed his flashlight and trudged through the mud, his boots sinking into the wet ground. As he approached, he saw a man slumped against the steering wheel. The car door creaked open, revealing a bruised and exhausted traveler, his suit soaked from the rain. "Sir, I—" the man stammered before collapsing. John caught him just in time. Something about him seemed unusual. His hands were rough, but his watch was expensive. His face was familiar, yet John couldn't place where he'd seen him before. Without hesitation, he carried the man back to his cabin, placing him near the fire. "You're lucky I found you," John muttered, wrapping a blanket around the stranger's shivering body. The next morning, as the storm cleared, John prepared some food. The man, now conscious, watched him carefully. "You saved my life," he finally said. His voice was deep but shaky. "I owe you more than you know." John waved it off, saying it was just the right thing to do. But the man wasn't done. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked. John frowned. That voice, it tugged at something buried deep in his memory. But before he could ask more, the stranger stood up. "I have to leave now, but soon you'll understand." Then just like that, he was gone. John watched as the car disappeared down the muddy road, his mind filled with questions. Who was he? Why did he look so familiar? And what did he mean by, "soon you'll understand"? Days passed and John tried to push the encounter out of his mind. But then his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then answered. "John Carter?" The voice on the other end was steady. "Yes? This is the President of the United States. We need to talk." His heart stopped. Why was the most powerful man in the country calling him? And how was it connected to the stranger he saved that night? John's grip tightened around the phone. The president? Calling him? His mind raced. This had to be a mistake. Maybe a prank. But then the voice continued. "You saved someone important, Mr. Carter," the president said. "And now your life is about to change." John felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced out the window, half expecting black SUVs to come rolling down his dirt road. "Who was that man?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. A pause, then, "I can't say over the phone, but you'll know soon." Before John could ask anything else, the line went dead. The next morning he woke up to the sound of helicopters. Dust kicked up around his cabin as a convoy of black vehicles pulled up. Men in suits and earpieces stepped out, scanning the area like they were securing a battlefield. John's military instincts kicked in. Whatever was happening, it was big. A tall man in a navy blue suit approached. "Mr. Carter, we need you to come with us." John crossed his arms. "Not until someone tells me what's going on." The agent hesitated, then finally spoke. "The man you saved? He's not just anyone. He's the head of a classified intelligence agency." John's breath hitched. "What?" The agent nodded. "And because of you, a national crisis was just avoided." John's mind reeled. The bruises, the exhaustion, the way the stranger vanished so quickly. It all made sense now, but before he could process it, the agent continued. "The president wants to meet you in person. There's something he needs to show you." As John climbed into the SUV, questions swirled in his mind. What exactly had he gotten himself into? What kind of crisis had he unknowingly stopped? And most importantly, what did the president need to show him? He didn't have to wait long for the answer, because when they arrived at the military base, something was waiting for him, something that would change his life forever. As John stepped out of the SUV, his boots touched the cold pavement of the military base. The air was thick with tension. Rows of uniformed soldiers stood at attention, their faces unreadable. But John barely noticed them. His eyes were locked on the man waiting for him, the same man he had pulled out of the freezing rain just days ago. Only now he wasn't wearing tattered clothes. He was in a high-ranking military uniform, adorned with medals and insignias. John froze. "It's you." The man smiled, but his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I owe you my life, Mr. Carter." John shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." The man stepped closer. "That's where you're wrong." He took a deep breath, then turned to the soldiers. "Attention!" In an instant, every soldier on the base stood straight and saluted, saluting John. John's breath caught in his throat. What's happening?" The president stepped forward now, his expression warm. "John Carter, your service never ended. You saved a man who holds the security of this nation in his hands. Because of you, an international attack was stopped before it even started." He gestured toward the uniformed man. "And now, it's time the country repays its debt to you." The officer handed John a letter, the official presidential seal stamped on the front. "This," he said, voice thick with emotion, "is your full military honor reinstatement. Everything you lost when you retired, every sacrifice you made, is being recognized today." John's vision blurred as he stared at the letter. His hands trembled. For years he had faded into the background, forgotten by the country he once served. And now he stood before a saluting army, being honored in a way he never expected. Tears welled in his eyes, not for himself, but for every soldier who had ever felt abandoned, for every veteran who had struggled in silence. The president placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You're a hero, John." For the first time in a long time, John smiled. Not the small, tired smiles he used to give, but a real one, filled with pride and purpose. As the soldiers lowered their salutes, the officer extended his hand. "There's one more thing." John shook it, and the officer leaned in. "You're not forgotten. None of you are. And I promise, things are about to change." John exhaled, a weight lifting off his chest. Maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they're just kind souls who help strangers in the rain. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. And tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced kindness that changed your life? We'd love to hear your story.